Welcome everyone to our webinar on the hydrogen economy. My name is Maike Althaus. I'm the Executive Director of the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association. We're very short on time and I'll stay in the background today. And without further ado, I'll hand over to OCTIA's chair, Peter MacArthur, for some opening remarks. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Maike. Good day. Bonjour à tous. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our Players in the Hydrogen Economy panel discussion presented by the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association, along with the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Association, represented today by Mark Kirby, and I think he's going to join us in a sec, and the Hydrogen Business Council, represented by Bob Stasko. Thank you to our co-hosts for helping to put on today's discussion. My name is Peter MacArthur. As Maike said, I am the chair of the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association, OCTIA, and I'm also RBCX's National Clean Tech Leader. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I and some others of us gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. We are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. Wherever you are on Turtle Island, we're grateful for the opportunity to be here. If you're familiar at all with Cleantech's role in helping us to decarbonize, and if you've tuned in today, I'm guessing you are, you will appreciate the tremendous hope that is placed upon the hydrogen sector to help us get to net zero. Today, we'll get a chance to probe into some of the players in the sector and how they are adopting innovative technologies. The Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association, logo over my head, represents the very broad clean technology industry in Ontario, with technologies ranging from water purification and testing, to electrification, to waste to energy, renewables materials, to renewable energy, including hydrogen, etc. It's a very diverse space. Together, the sector employs about 40,000 people across Ontario, providing high-paying jobs to the various professionals involved in the chemistry, physics, engineering, and other sciences required to help us on our path to net zero emissions. We'd very much like to thank EDC for their partnership and support. Merci, Lynn. And we'd like to thank Cleantech North for your support. Thank you, Brian. And of course, we want to thank the various members of all the associations that are gathered today for your participation. It's because of you that we can deliver this sort of programming, provoke thought, interest about an incredibly important part of the clean energy economy. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable David Piccini, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for the province of Ontario. David is the Member of Parliament representing the constituents of Northumberland, Peterborough South, and was appointed to his current role on June 18th of this year. We appreciate Mr. Piccini joining us early in his endeavors with his ministry. He brings a diversity of knowledge and experience from Agriculture Canada to international trade to the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. He lives in Port Hope with his partner and 2 dogs. He loves to hike Northumberland County forest trails and connect with the natural environment that is such an important part of what we're involved in. And he loves to visit Killarney Park with his father, a personal favorite of mine. I'll add another personal note. The Trent Severn Waterway runs through his riding, and I met my wife on the Trent Severn Waterway. Without further ado, Minister Piccini, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for that kind introduction. Thank you for having me. Good things happen in Northumberland. I'm glad you met your wife there. It is beautiful, the Trent Severn Waterway, and yes, avid hiker. Very excited, obviously, to be Ontario's youngest environment minister and love this portfolio. I've been just over 2 months in the role. but Parks is a favorite, and Killarney is a special favorite of mine. If you haven't, I would highly encourage everyone to get out and try the grueling Lacloche, this Lacloche Silhouette Mountain Trail. It's an incredible trail. I want to thank the hosts and the organizers. I mean, you've done a phenomenal job in bringing together leaders in the development of Ontario and governments in unleash entrepreneurship, and addressing our economic issues, and the actions we take today will determine the life for generations. Fortunate to have so much talent and dedication working in a service of healthy, more prosperous. Our current study on protecting the environment is based on a clean and prosperous environment, and strong and prosperous economy go hand in hand. And our prosperity, health, and the state of our natural resources are all closely linked together. I think this puts our ministry in a strong position to maintain effective and safeguards and contribute to rebuilding the provincial economy. Low carbon hydrogen has an increasingly important role to play in helping meet our target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while creating a really exciting opportunity for jobs and opportunity in this province. The government of Ontario is committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 30%, as you all know, by 2005 levels by 2030, and we're already well on our way to meeting this target. In fact, Ontario's emissions have already decreased by 21%, and our province of Ontario is responsible for almost all of Canada's towards the Paris Agreement. At a national level, have been reduced by 1% since 2005. That Ontario is playing, and the real opportunity to continue this lead forward. We're supporting the efforts of Ontario's industries to cut their greenhouse emissions by reducing their use of coal, or common efforts to green Ontario's power grid with initiatives like our EPS standards, where large emitters of free gas emissions. This is not but effective and to the need circumstances. We also have cleaner transportation regulations about which require suppliers to increase the renewable contents and gas by 50%. 2023. We made that this reduces 1 megaton a year, 30, equivalent to taking approximately 300,000 vehicles off the road each year. This will support the biofuel sector, jobs in rural communities as alternatives to fossil fuel, coal, diesel, and natural carbon, hydrogen, all events exciting possibilities, and really that as a government. And I think a lot of growth for the hydrogen industry. Of course, the use of hydrogen is already increasing in Ontario and across Canada. I know, for example, Canadian Tire and Walmart recently announced using hydrogen power forklifts in distribution centers. An exciting joint pilot project between Enbridge Gas and Cumming is blending low carbon hydrogen gas into the exciting Enbridge and natural gas network. I'd now like to briefly share a bit more on our government's vision for the emerging hydrogen economy in Ontario, one that we know will see low carbon hydrogen as a pivotal piece in creating jobs, attracting investment, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Hydrogen was an important focus of Ontario's Job and Recovery Committee, which we launched in spring 2020 to identify challenges industries were facing from the COVID-19 pandemic and how we could support them. We created a ministerial advisory council for hydrogen, which included representatives from the hydrogen industry, and received excellent recommendations on how Ontario can drive growth in a clean hydrogen economy through provincial policy, planning, and targeted investments, including the development of a hydrogen strategy for Ontario. Spoken with the Ontario Chamber about this and have met with the working group. They put forward some phenomenal recommendations. And last November, we released a discussion paper for public consultation that set out our vision for Ontario's first ever hydrogen strategy to support a robust hydrogen economy in this province. The responses we received gave us a better handle on the needs for the sector, including many of you here today, and the needs of consumers. We also gained a better understanding of the challenges involved in supporting the complex hydrogen market. And we received a lot of good ideas about how we can work with the private sector to expand adoption of hydrogen and support regional growth. We created a working group with members of the industry and academia to help inform our strategy and attract investment, which will lead to more job creation while helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions using this technology. The working group has been a tremendous help for my ministry, for me, and for our government, as its expertise includes a number of areas, and it's well positioning us for the future. One area the working group has been looking at is hydrogen's potential role as a clean fuel alternative to fossil fuels for the transportation sector. It included discussions about a role for hydrogen in Ontario's clean transit networks, including buses and passenger trains, as well as commercial vehicles. Canada is already a hydrogen leader, especially when it comes to rail. Fuel cells developed by Ontario by Cumming are powering over 40 regional trains in Germany, and we've got to find ways. We want to find ways to put this know-how into use right here in the province of Ontario with help from stakeholders like yourselves. Our government wants to identify and support technologies and business models that can use cost-competitive, low-carbon hydrogen in ways that allow us to leverage the investments that have already been made in decarbonizing our electricity system. We know that Ontario produces 96% of our electricity emissions-free. That's 96%, and we'd like to get that to 100, but that gives us an immense advantage in the province of Ontario for investment and as people look to our clean grid. Hydrogen has some distinct advantages as a fuel for buses, being a clean fuel with zero emissions at the tailpipe. Hydrogen cells function consistently across weather conditions and can withstand, of course, the many cold winters we've come to know and understand and love in some cases in Canada. As such, we're well positioned to be real world leaders in hydrogen-powered zero-emission buses. Ontario companies are now developing and manufacturing fuel cells and electric buses, as we also have a well-developed hydrogen supply chain. This positions Ontario to consider opportunities in hydrogen-powered zero-emission buses. Transit has the potential to drive consumption of hydrogen at a scale to support the economies of fuel production, drive large-scale emissions reductions, and subsequent adoption of this technology. Our cluster of medium and large-scale transit agencies would be able to support the establishment of an economic and energy-efficient fuel distribution network. We want to make Ontario the Canadian leader in adopting this commercially proven technology that will facilitate the growth of the hydrogen economy. We're now reviewing the comments we have received through consultation, along with the feedback and recommendations from the external working group, and I look forward to releasing Ontario's final hydrogen strategy later this year. It's an exciting time for the hydrogen sector, and I want to assure you that Ontario is committed to helping your industry expand and make your solutions a part of daily life here in this province. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to create a healthier and more prosperous future for generations to come, to build a robust economy in this province as we rebound from COVID. And I know the important role you all are going to play in that. So I really look forward to working with all of you in the weeks and months ahead, and really appreciate the opportunity to join you this morning. Thanks very much for having me, Peter.
Minister Piccini, thank you very much for those comments. I'm thrilled to hear about your level of knowledge, awareness, sensitivity to this sector. The Ontario has got incredible strength. It's clean technology sector. And hydrogen is absolutely one of those. I'm sure that Bob Stasko jumped out of his seat when you talked about trains that passionately. You know, it's a dream for us to see those GO trains not emitting diesel. And if we can move buses. So I'm glad to hear you're well aware of that. And yes, absolutely. We should absolutely have Ontario as the leader in Canada for the hydrogen economy. Absolutely.
And for those of you familiar with Port Hope and Bob, I think growing up with trains is very much etched in the fabric of who we are as Port Hopians, of course. So it's one of the few towns where you can still hear the trains roaring through town, and so it's very much etched in my upbringing. But I agree with you, Peter, and I think this is exciting, and I really look forward. I know, you know, with just becoming Environment Minister 2 months ago, I'm very, very excited about the hydrogen piece. I know the Premier shares that excitement, and looking forward for that strategy towards the end of this year. So again, an open invitation to all of you, looking forward to continuing this dialogue in the weeks and months ahead as we return to the legislature and release the strategy later this year.
Merci beaucoup. I know all the organizations here today, Minister Piccini, are looking forward to helping to build a vibrant clean tech sector. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Mark Kirby, President and CEO of the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. Mark has real pedigree in the hydrogen sector, including senior leadership positions at Ballard Power. And Mark, you missed it when I welcomed you and thanked CHFCA for helping put on today's event. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. My pleasure. And Mr. Piccini, that was very indeed inspiring to hear some of the knowledge and the opportunities in Ontario. And we certainly agree, Ontario is the economic heartland of Canada with leading hydrogen and fuel cell companies that work around the world. And we are very excited to see hydrogen energy deployed in Ontario and the benefits it can bring both economically and environmentally. I have been charged today with giving an overview of the hydrogen landscape in Canada, which is an impossible task because it's so active, so many things going on, but I will do my best to try and give you an overview. What I will wind up doing though is going extremely quickly. I apologize for that. And but do feel free, the slide deck will be available, and do feel free to reach out afterwards if there's any questions and so on. So without further ado, quick overview. First of all, CHFCA, we're a national industry nonprofit association representing Canada's hydrogen fuel cell sector. And we do typical advocacy things. We also have affiliations with branches in Ontario, HPC, which is Bob represents, also in Hydrogen BC and Hydrogen Quebec, and a growing membership. We have leading companies in the hydrogen and fuel cell sector from across the country and in all different types of industries that share the common aspect of being in the value chain for hydrogen and fuel cells. Big companies, small companies, tech companies, service providers, universities, a really exciting and broad range and growing quickly. This is an asset that Canada has that is truly a benefit to us. Very quickly, people are aware of what hydrogen is, I'm assuming, but if not, we do have a backgrounder on our website that you're with infographics that you can refer to. It gives some overviews and information on it. Very quickly, hydrogen is an energy carrier. It can be made through electrolysis, and if that's done with clean power, it's clean hydrogen. It can be done by reforming fossil fuels or by biomass. And if the CO2 emitted from that process is contained through carbon capture sequestration or carbon management, then that is also clean hydrogen. Once you've made that hydrogen, it does not further emit GHGs, however you use it, whether you burn it, whether you use it in a fuel cell, whether you use it in an internal combustion engine. Once you've made that hydrogen, it is a clean energy source. So it all is about how you make that hydrogen. And there's many ways to make clean, low carbon intensity hydrogen from all Canada's energy resources. A fuel cell is like a battery, but as long as you feed it with hydrogen and air, it will produce electricity. But it is an electrical device, converts that hydrogen back into electricity. Canada has been a leader in this for many, many years. Ballard started over 40 years ago, and we have formerly Hydrogenics, now Cumming in Ontario, that have been working in this for decades. Fuel cell electric vehicles are just that. They're electric vehicles. They are a combination of battery and fuel cell that give you all the benefits of electric drive, but you have a smaller battery, and that battery is replaced with a hydrogen storage tank and a fuel cell stack and associated ancillaries. The net result is something that gives an electric vehicle additional range, lower weight, fast fill capability, resilience, and that you can move it between different types of operations easily, and cost advantages. And so that means essentially what you have is now electric vehicles that can displace internal combustion engines in every application, on land, sea, air, in large and small. You can now look at electrifying them all. Hydrogen has been used in a wide range of areas. It's been used in industrial processing, in heating and combustion, as an alternative to electrification to replace natural gas. It's used for energy storage. It's used of course, in transportation in combination with batteries. So it is a broad range where it can be used. Canada, and what we're doing today, well, it's been recognized that hydrogen is an essential part of our net zero future. You really need hydrogen to decarbonize some challenging sectors, such as long-haul transportation and trucks, trains, and ships, such as heavy industries, chemicals, cement, and steel, building heat, and energy storage and supply. So it is essential to get to net zero. And that is really a key point to emphasize. You can't get there without hydrogen. How much hydrogen? There's a lot of debate. Is it going to be 5% of our energy source? Is it going to be 30% of our energy future? That's a debate. It'll depend a lot on how good a job my members do in developing products and services, but it is going to be a significant player in the future zero carbon economy. The other part of it is huge economic opportunity. How big? Well, if you look at the total energy investments going on around the world, we'll be looking at about 15 trillion, that's for all the power plants, oil projects, et cetera, through 2030. Hydrogen now, projected documented projects are up to $500 billion. That's 3% of that, and growing very rapidly. That's becoming a significant player in this overall energy sector, and one heck of a business opportunity that we need to take advantage of. We can, because we have these companies that are extremely capable, that cover all the value parts of hydrogen and fuel cell, from fuel cell products to hydrogen production, distribution, fueling stations, and engineering services, research, et cetera. So a really broad range of capabilities. We stand to benefit more than most countries through the advent and use of hydrogen. We are starting from a good place. We have projects right across the country, including in Ontario. We are a top 10 hydrogen producer. We have 3 merchant hydrogen plants, all in close proximity to Ontario, and 2 more planned. We are leading clean hydrogen producer, and we're the cradle of the PEM fuel cell. And we have developing hubs, a key driver for getting hydrogen on the ground. This is a partial list of some of the projects across the country. I won't go into them, but there are many of them are world leading, including multi-billion-dollar projects happening in Alberta to produce clean hydrogen there for use in industrial processing, heating, and transportation. Actions, the federal government is all in on this. They've developed the hydrogen strategy and a revised climate plan. They've got policy in place that are helping to drive zero emission alternatives such as hydrogen, and funding. I'll just focus on the 1.5 billion Clean Fuel Fund. That is something that was just launched in July. Last night, I was writing letters of support for 2 projects. International company looking at a multi-billion-dollar investments into renewable hydrogen production on our East Coast and our West Coast, for both use domestically and export. Really exciting economic opportunities that are coming out of this. And it's not only at the federal level, we also have the provinces getting behind it. Minister Piccini talked about Ontario, BC, Quebec, Alberta have all recognized the opportunity that hydrogen presents. When you have in Canada, Ontario, BC, Quebec, Alberta, and the federal government all agreeing on something, hey, this is pretty exciting. Hydrogen should be a very large part of our use in 2050. It should be 30%, up to 30% of our energy use. Lots of CO2 abatements right through the economy, creating investment and jobs. And we want to be a top 3 energy exporter. So a huge opportunity. Very quick on the hydrogen supply. Many ways you can make it. In Canada, we're going to need a lot of hydrogen. If we try to get it all from one source, let's say from renewable power, it's going to be a challenge. We need in Canada to have a broad sources of hydrogen from all of our energy resources: nuclear, biomass, renewable power, and fossil fuels with carbon management. And to provide confidence for the public and for our exports, we need to put in place standards and regulation that ensures and measures from cradle to grave what is the carbon intensity of those production pathways, and tracks those so that end users can be confident that what they're buying is indeed low carbon intensity hydrogen at the best possible cost. And that needs to be aligned with international standards. The key thing we need to be working on and getting in place as we move forward. Hubs are another key thing. We have need for hubs. There are centers where you locate applications around low-cost supply. This is the way we get things started, because scale and proximity leads to low cost, leads to reduced hydrogen cost, leads to sustainable economics and economic growth. We have hubs developing already, major one in Edmonton. They're developing in Vancouver and Bécancour. We need them in Ontario. Really interesting opportunity. We have a hubs working group that is working on how do you do that? How do you start moving forward to get hubs in place? I will leave it at that point. I'm sorry for taking a long time, but I think it hopefully provides some useful information and gives a little background and context to what we're going to be talking about. Thanks so much.
Great, Mark. Well, thank you very much. And I think we're going to pass the baton over to Lynn Côté from EDC, who is going to have a panel discussion. Lynn,
Right, and I should, because I would like to do this, give a quick introduction of Lynn. That was part of my job here. Lynn Côté joined Export Development Canada over 20 years ago, and in her career has worked on a number of teams, held various roles. And so before she got into her current role, she was responsible for development of strategy, tactics, industry knowledge for the forestry, food, apparel, plastics, and packaging sectors. But since 2013, she's been on the Cleantech team and responsible for development of strategy, tactics, and partnerships, industry knowledge development for the cleantech sector. Much of her work is focused on understanding Canadian cleantech sector with a specialization in renewable energy, waste energy, water, wastewater, and clean tech for the oil and gas and mining sectors. She's written and spoken on opportunities in the markets in several publications and events. She has a BSc from Concordia University and an MBA in energy and sustainability from the University of Cumbria in the UK. She's fluent in French and English and has a working knowledge of Spanish. And I've known her for a number of years, and it's a great pleasure to introduce her at this point. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's like my career in 30 seconds. So I've been asked to be the Andre de Grasse of this panel. So my job is to run the last leg and to win us a medal. Thank you very much for that, Mark. I consider hydrogen to be probably one of the most exciting topics in clean tech. It's also one of the hardest. It's very, very complex. And I think that presentations like yours, it just seems so obvious, so thank you for that. I'm hoping you'll share that presentation, because I made myself a note, get that presentation, because it was really, really good. So what I'm going to do to be the Andre de Grasse is I'm going to introduce our panel. We have a fantastic panel, but I'm not going to do the long intros. I'm just going to names and where they're from, and then we will get into each one of them turn by turn. We'll do a 5-minute presentation, and then we've got some great questions that I think will help us better understand the opportunities and, why are we hearing, if for nothing else at the end of this, we should be able to understand why are we hearing the word hydrogen everywhere? Why does it matter who's playing, this, what still needs to be done? So that's our goal for today. So I will start in the order that I was given. So we have Irene Yang, who's the Director of Business Development and Innovation from BASF Canada. Rob Cumming, the Head of Sustainability and Public Affairs for Lafarge. Martin Vroegh, President, Standard Hydrogen Canada. John Adams, President and CEO, Natural Gas Innovation Fund, also known as NGIF. And Matthew Fairlie, Vice Chairman, Next Hydrogen Corporation. So I'm not sure what the order is of presentation, so I'm going to go in the order that I was given. So I think, Irene, it is over to you.
Thanks very much, Lynn and group. Just wanted to briefly introduce myself. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides? Great. Hi, everyone. I'm the Director of Business Development with BASF in Canada. I'm going to make a few short remarks. Really happy to be here today on this esteemed panel. For those of you who don't know BASF, we're a large chemical company globally headquartered out of Germany. And our role is responding to some of the world's challenges across multiple industries. I'll start very briefly along the bottom here. By 2050, a lot of the world's population is going to be urbanized. They're going to require a lot more energy and food with, as everyone knows, limited resources in arable land and, of course, energy. So chemistry is an opportunity to really have more outputs with limited inputs. So we see ourselves as an enabler, servicing a lot of the industries listed along the top here. Several of these industries, we are very active as well in Canada. Germany, like Canada, is quite a leading economy interested in making hydrogen quite a central part of its net zero strategy. Across Canada, and sorry, I'm not going to move to presentation mode in the interest of time. Across Canada, we have just under 1,200 employees, coast to coast, and a dozen or so sites. And some of the top industries listed on my first slide are very, very active here in Canada as well. Now, BASF's journey to net zero. So we plan to grow our production significantly, yet become CO2 neutral also by 2050. But in the immediate term, really on a track to reduce our emissions of our own operations. I talked about our Canadian operations, but globally, for example, needing to do several things, both in carbon management as well as circular economy, to do so, and at the same time, again, increase that production output to service the world's needs. So I'll talk briefly about carbon management strategy and how hydrogen, in particular methane pyrolysis, fits into our strategy. In column 1, continuous improvement processes for our existing plants. Number 2 is the increasing share of renewable energy in our global sites. I'll give you a couple examples. 23 sites across Europe and North America are utilizing wind and solar. We use hydropower for a new battery plant in Finland. And here in Canada, a bullfrog power partnership across all of our sites in Canada as well. And actually recently completed the acquisition of 49.5% stake in a 1.5 gigawatt offshore wind farm in Northern Europe, which I think is on track to be the largest offshore wind farm in the world. Power to steam generation is another example of our carbon management strategy. And in number 4, which I'll elaborate a bit more, is our methane pyrolysis and steam cracker electrification strategy, the latter of which is in partnership with SABIC. The methane pyrolysis, I will elaborate a little bit more, really to the opening remarks by Mark and others. And then lastly, bio-based feedstock using biomass is another pillar of BASF's carbon management strategy. Just some visuals and a quick word on circular economy. We're very active in some projects across Canada and North America as well, in particular mechanical recycling for plastic circularity. And on the left-hand side, I've already talked about some of these examples. So I'm hoping that to show a very brief video, and please give me a thumbs up if you can see my YouTube screen now. Okay, we're good. So there's no sound, so don't worry if you can't hear anything. So what is methane pyrolysis? It really enables the splitting of methane to produce solid carbon and a CO2-free process. So methane flows into our reactor, and we have a test plant, by the way, set up now in Germany, heated to more than 1,000 degrees Celsius, and it's split at the center of the reactor. And the gaseous hydrogen really rises up for use in industrial use. And hopefully that'll come up a bit in the Q&A. There's no gaseous CO2 created. The carbon is left at the end as a solid granule. And it's produced, a methane pyrolysis is produced using renewable sources, so it's CO2 free. So our particular journey from an R&D side, and I'll try to stop my video here. Our particular use from an R&D side really started, our project, started in 2010. And we have a test plant in place and really on track to a pilot plant in 2025-ish timeframe and large scale commercial facility by 2030. So really excited to discuss here today, how do we work with partners in general across Canada? I'm happy to answer any questions if I'm able around potential applicability, and very excited to hear about Canada's initiatives and funding support for a lot of hydrogen related projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. That was really good. Thank you for the visuals for those of us who like to see the pictures. Over to you, Rob from Lafarge. Oh, Rob, you're on mute.
There's always one of us, and it's always me.
That's all right.
All right, let me share my screen. It's good to meet all of you. And people keep sending me texts, and it's blocking my screen. There we go. All right, let's get started. I think it was mentioned earlier that cement and steel are large emitters, and that's absolutely true. And we have a definite drive to reduce carbon emissions from our company. It's an existential threat for cement, so we're very interested in moving forward. So just a real quick thing about some of these targets, a bit about our company. We manufacture cements, and we also quarry aggregates, and we also mix those together to make concrete. We're also, what's not always apparent is we're a big transportation company as well. So in Canada, we have over 1,400 ready-mix trucks that we directly manage, plus we ship cement in and out as well. So essentially, this is my third and then last slide. I just want to talk a bit about why we think hydrogen is going to be a great solution for our business sector. So first of all, as a company, we have set targets for our scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is the production and electricity. Scope 3 is, of course, everything else. And I think of the remaining amount, it's like 20,000 tons of CO2 per year. It represents about 20% of our total emissions is our scope 3. And of that, about a quarter of that is our ready-mix trucks. We're the first company in our sector to set a target to reduce our emissions from scope 3. What's good about our company and all the other ready-mix companies that are in the same boat as us is that essentially we are always close to a construction site. You start to mix water with cement and gravel and sand, and that's what concrete is, by the way. Once it starts to set, so you only have a few hours to get to the construction site and deliver your product before it starts to become unworkable. So we're always located close to our construction sites, and those are short haul trips there and then back for another load. And we're essentially dispatching from one central location out and then back again. So we're not doing cross Canada transportation. And that makes a very interesting opportunity for us to hopefully be leaders someday in switching from diesel to hydrogen. The other interesting thing for us is that I understand that if you have a full transition over to a fuel cell coupled potentially with some battery support, that you can, it's a lighter load. That means we can deliver more concrete per trip. And that's a huge improvement for us. So it's very interesting to see how that plays out. And there's opportunities as this starts to expand and commercialize that we might be able to work with partners to become a distribution hub, storage hub, those sorts of things. So that's why we're watching the hydrogen business very closely to see if we could be one of the first customers of the people on this call. Some of the hurdles we've seen so far is that the manufacturers need to be able to provide us ready-mix engines, so to speak, that are ready, hydrogen ready. There's going to be a transition period, which is going to be difficult because the cost of installation of a hydrogen storage system is fairly significant. And if we've got 80 ready-mix plants across just Eastern Canada and an additional 100 across Western Canada, it starts to make it a fairly expensive transition. So but once we transition over, there is some optimism with some of the technology providers I've been speaking with that the actual cost will be lower than diesel. And as carbon pricing continues to expand, that savings will become even more significant. So that's where we're at today and why we're interested. And I know we're running out of time, so I am going to leave it there.
Thank you, Rob. That was really interesting. I will hold you to that you want to be a first customer. I have a long memory, so we'll remember that. Martin from Standard Hydrogen Canada, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I hope everybody can hear me. I had a few difficulties earlier, and I'm on dialing in while speaking here, so that's great. So thanks for that. I'll present my screen here, hopefully. One moment. A second here. Here we go. Okay. If thumbs up, everybody can see my presentation. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So as mentioned, I'm Martin Vroegh. I'm the president of Standard Hydrogen Canada. Standard Hydrogen Canada is a Canadian division of headquartered. We have our headquarters for the American division in the United States. We have a somewhat interesting technology that is new, and as a startup company, I'll just briefly explain a little bit a technology overview. In simplest of terms, what we have the ability to do is to process hydrocarbons. What we're targeting specifically are things like plastics, and we can also look at hydrocarbons like methane. as an example, and we digest these hydrocarbons in a hot liquid sulfur digester and produce hydrogen sulfide gas. And we can then catalytically split the hydrogen sulfide gas into basically hydrogen, very high purity hydrogen. We're actually achieving 10 nines of purity, and have actually spun off part of the technology into another company that produces H2 final filter that can make filters for hydrogen fuel cells that will achieve 10 nines of purity for hydrogen, extending fuel cell life dramatically. The hydrogen is extracted and sulfur is returned to digest more hydrocarbons. So that's it, in very simplest terms, that's it. And in the first process, as the hydrogen sulfide is extracted, the solid carbon is also extracted from the process. And what makes this process interesting to go through the hydrogen sulfide step is something known as Gibbs free energy, which is the energy, in simplest terms, to reverse the chemical reaction, to try basically how much energy you're going to have to put in to split a hydrogen sulfide molecule. And what's interesting is that when compared to splitting water, which is 56.7 kilocalories per mole, hydrogen sulfide only takes 8.9 kilocalories per mole. So that's 6.4 times less energy to split a hydrogen sulfide molecule than to split a water molecule. In practice, due to the fact that we have to heat the process and heat the sulfur, and it's a thermocatalytic reaction, we're more like 5 times less energy than splitting water. And so it amounts to around 12 kilowatt hours to produce a kilogram of hydrogen, which is quite an interesting starting point thermodynamically. And so we're working with Lafarge to explore this technology as an option for Lafarge. And why this technology has some very interesting abilities to be an interesting partner for the cement industry is certainly not just the low cost aspect of the hydrogen that would be produced due to the low energy input to create the hydrogen, but there are some other interesting things about the cement industry. The cement industry for years has been pursuing low carbon fuels, often in the form of other hydrocarbons, whether they be biomass hydrocarbons or plastics. And so many cement plants are already permitted to accept plastics that are waste plastics from a multitude of sources. This makes it an interesting raw material option that is already permitted for these sites to produce the hydrogen from. There's also existing infrastructure and hydrogen in general for existing fleets with diesel. There's opportunity for co-firing diesel hydrogen in a diesel engine, which is a nice way to utilize hydrogen in existing capital infrastructure. You have return to home fleets, and Rob touched a lot on that, so I'll move on a little quickly here. But one of the interesting things as well is that in a polyethylene molecule, you're looking at about 86% carbon, about 75% carbon by mass in a methane molecule. This produces a lot of carbon. And one of the interesting companies that Standard Hydrogen is working with is a SDTC company that is Universal Matter, that is making turbostratic flash graphene out of the carbon. And we have been doing tests with that in concrete and have shown strength increases so far around 54% strength increase in concrete, which means you could reduce the cement quantity used in a cubic meter of concrete, reducing CO2 emissions per cubic meter of concrete by over 180 kilograms. It's a very interesting opportunity when you consider that concrete is the most consumed substance on the planet by man after water. And so it becomes an interesting avenue for the carbon that would be produced globally by splitting hydrocarbons and extracting the hydrogen. It gives you a high value opportunity for that at high volume for the carbon. And this is only at 0.1% cementitious substitution rate. So at 0.1% addition to the cement that goes into concrete, it's over 50% increase in strength. The technology we have is about a TRL4. So that's basically, we're constructing right now a mobile pilot plant. And we're looking to target about the production rate of 1 to 2 concrete trucks of concrete supply per day. Of hydrogen supply to power those vehicles per day. And we have plans that are looking at around 5,000 kilograms per day of hydrogen production And one of the reasons why we specifically work with plastic is we have access with some of our partners at Standard Hydrogen to over 500 tons a day of scrap plastic from the manufacturing sector. So that is a very interesting opportunity to avoid landfill and to create hydrogen from it. So that's it. Hopefully I was quick enough to get us a little bit back on some of the timeline. So thank you, Lynn, for that.
Thanks, Martin. And yeah, very interesting to see a very specific application for hydrogen because there are so many use cases. So good luck with the continued project on that, because I think that will be very interesting. So John Adams from President and CEO Natural Gas Innovation Fund. Over to you, my friend.
I'm just clicking share screen. It says I cannot share screen while the other participant is sharing. Did you let go, Martin?
Yeah, he's out.
I did let go. Try
Super.
again.
Great. Good morning. So thank you, Lynn. I'm just going to connect here. I think everyone can see my screen. So I've just put I put my timer on so I can make sure I give you exactly 5 minutes. My name is, I'm the president CEO of NGF Capital Corp. Essentially, we run Martin's presentation as a startup to an actual strategic fund for Canada. We essentially run two funds, an innovation fund and a venture fund, all targeted towards natural gas and including renewable gases, including hydrogen. So we bring to our investments either our grantees for projects or our investment into companies, Canada's energy leadership to pretty much every investment we make. So as a venture capital fund, we have strong connections to all parts of the gas value chain, and our model is really around testing, validating, and creating customers for clean tech startups, including hydrogen and clean tech startups. 3 different divisions, our industry grants, our emissions testing center, which is one site. On the innovation fund, what's important I want to share with you as an innovation fund, on the left, you'll see logos. We have 14 gas corporates across Canada. So on the production of gas, on the pipeline transmission of gas, or on the end use distribution of gas. And so these 14 corporates pretty much tell us, meaning NGIF Capital Corp, their needs with respect to environmental performance in the gas sector. And one of those needs is the production of hydrogen. So we spend a lot of time around this table looking for the opportunities, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And here on this particular fund, we generate patents, we create jobs, we generate megatons of CO2 equivalents, and again along the value chain of a natural gas. Our second fund that runs in tandem with the innovation fund supporting clean tech projects for hydrogen. We have our ventures fund. It's again, if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see 7 gas corporates. It's a 100% strategic fund looking at pathways for emissions reduction for the gas sector, which includes the creation and investments into hydrogen technologies. A managing partner of this fund, we have a 50 million fund to date, and this 50 million will be going into very strategic investments around performance of the gas sector, and hydrogen production is considered a very strong way to increase the performance of the gas sector. On this last slide, so we have, I believe, 9 project investments. So this is our grantee portfolio. Our grantee portfolio generally spends time in TRL 4 to 7, de-risking clean technologies for specific application. These are our 9 clean technology companies that have some value proposition on the production of hydrogen for the gas sector. Some of them, and many of them, are along a specific value chain within the production of gas. So sometimes it's a component of the production of hydrogen for the gas sector. All of these will mature likely between the next 5 to 10 years. And many of them will be either on the production of hydrogen from natural gas or on the production of green hydrogen. So we don't care which sort of supply it comes from, just as long as it's producing an economic hydrogen gas for our sector. So I'll stop there, Lynn. That's just over 4 minutes. We are actively building our portfolio for the gas sector on hydrogen technologies, and on our venture fund, we are starting to now make placements into hydrogen solutions. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, John, and you get the prize for Matthew. Still has a chance to get it for getting us back on track. So last but not least in the presentations, Matthew Fairlie from Next Hydrogen Corporation, over to you.
Thank you, Lynn, and I want to thank the organizing committee for this opportunity to introduce the audience to Next Hydrogen. And I'll do the same. I'll just expand this so that it's more visible. Next Hydrogen is a player in the green hydrogen space. We build green hydrogen infrastructure for customers and our partners. The company is based in Ontario, in Mississauga, and it's been operating for a little over 12 years. And the founding of the company 12 years ago was based on the vision of renewable energy that's connecting water electrolysis, I should say renewable hydrogen, connecting water electrolysis process, which Mark talked about earlier. That's an electrochemical process that produces hydrogen and oxygen from electricity and water with renewable energy. And around this vision, we have developed patented technology, which has been extensively protected, as you can see below. And in our current form, we produce or we supply to the market packaged hydrogen generators that connect to the grid to produce pressurized, purified electrolytic hydrogen. We've developed this technology with our partners, specifically ACL, but also with Canadian Tire in the GTA, and our systems are being used at their facilities. Looking at where we're going with the technology, we're extending beyond the on-site systems that we think will be successful in the goods movement sector, in material handling, excuse me, and in small fleets, to larger systems, scaling our technology up to larger systems in green dedicated renewable hydrogen plants. So that gives you an overview of Next Hydrogen. I'd encourage you to to look for additional details on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And while we're not caught up, I think we're doing pretty well. So what we're going to do is we have some questions, but we'll also take questions from the audience. So send them in. You can use the chat. There's also the Q&A where there's some questions have been coming in there. I also wanted to thank again the organizers for providing the opportunity for Export Development Canada. We're very, very interested in the hydrogen topic. So, if you've got a project, if you've got a company, I mean, we want to hear from you. So, I speak 3 languages, and right now I can't think of the word in any language. Mike will send you my email, and I'm happy to take it and then to pass it on to my colleagues. So that's the EDC infomercial. So John, I want to start with you. Why is hydrogen important for the natural gas industry? What do all those funders that you have, I think it was 14, what are they seeing? What's the opportunity for them? Is it an economic opportunities and environmental? Is it to meet certain targets that they've established, or all of the above?
Sure, Lynn. So happy to answer that question. And I echo Lynn. If there are hydrogen startups on this call, please reach out to Lynn and ourselves. We have two funds that can help support the growth of your organization. So what do we hear around the table when we bring 14 gas corporate directors of innovation and technology, and we ask them, what would you like to see from the aspect of priorities? It's really around emissions reduction, Lynn. And so from a decarbonization point of view, there is an opportunity from a hydrogen blending point of view to blend and leverage the existing infrastructure. So it's an environmental target conversation. I would also say it's a relevance conversation with many organizations wanting to see fossil fuel completely go away. Of course, our industry doesn't want to see that, but our industry wants to work with the idea of reducing the emission reduction profile of gas. And so this is a repositioning conversation too around the idea of natural gas as a great product. We're going to leverage hydrogen as a way to keep it moving forward. The other piece I would say is, and again, I've got folks that are on the upstream who take gas out of the ground, and then I have downstream who are bringing gas to homes or residences. So from an infrastructure point of view, hydrogen uses the natural gas, or can use the natural gas infrastructure across Canada, and with carbon capture, together with carbon capture, there's an opportunity also to avoid stranded gas assets in the production, which is important, and also again leveraging an existing pipeline infrastructure and generation network to maintain the relevance of natural gas coming to homes. So I'll stop there. I wanted to really boil it down to, it's an emission reduction, environmental performance opportunity for the gas sector. It's also keeping the assets moving and working, and bringing gas to homes across Canada.
Thank you, John. Just a quick question, because everybody always wants to know about the money, or at least maybe it's just me. How much is NGIF investing in? Is it specific to hydrogen, or is it an overall envelope?
No, we have priorities. The two main priorities are emissions reduction along the value chain of gas, and then the production of renewable gases. I would say the majority of our investments tend to go around emission reduction across the value chain of gas, because it's a really it's a late TRL discussion, and we can have performance generation right away, especially with on the CH4 looming regulations. We want those met. But I would say certainly a third of the money going out the door. I think if you count up our 9 projects, there's probably in total eligible project costs in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 million in these projects that are de-risking hydrogen. That's a longer play, and certainly farther out. But I would say a third of our money is going towards the exploration of how we can get these hydrogen technologies producing hydrogen gas in a cost-effective way, and getting it into the hands of our members.
Thanks, John. Now, I know there was a little thing with Zoom, so there's a lot of Maikes out there. So when I look at the questions, they're all from her, and then I realize, okay, it's just the way that Zoom works. So I don't know who who asked the questions, so I'm sorry for that. But one of the questions that I have on my list, but somebody has asked it, because I think it's a really good one. Is when you look at the regulatory environment, are there regulatory barriers that exist right now? Are there challenges that you have to overcome? And are there things happening that are going to help that? And that question was originally for Matthew from Next Hydrogen. So Matthew, if you want to answer that, it's yours.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I think if we're looking at the regulatory environment, I would look to California. California is seeing a large development of hydrogen vehicles. There are now 10,000 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on the roads in California. And how is this being accomplished? It's being accomplished with some state supports, but looking at the way in which those supports are channeled, it's through a climate change program, which the state has committed to and which is making great progress towards, and fiscal measures such as the low carbon fuel standard.
Oh, Matthew, I think we just maybe temporarily lost you there.
He's frozen.
Yeah, I think you're frozen, Matthew, but I will, Mark's put his hand up. So maybe while Matthew's frozen, hopefully he'll unfreeze. How about over to you, Mark, to help us finish the answer?
Yeah, and of course, being an industry association, we have a list of policy suggestions for the federal government. But I think just carrying on from where Martin was going, yeah, California is a great model. They have something called the low carbon fuel standard. BC has a similar model with a low carbon fuel standard, and we're putting in place in Canada the clean fuel standard. And there are ways that can be used very effectively to help drive investment into hydrogen filling stations to support the rollout of vehicles. They also have a support process for funding vehicles, which is something we can emulate. We have that in place for buses. We have it to some extent for light duty vehicles, but I think there's opportunities to look at that, particularly as the trucking market develops, that we can learn from them as to how to drive adoption.
Great, thank you for that and for stepping in there. Irene, a question for you. Is BASF investing in your own R&D, or are you working with smaller partners, or both? What does that business model look like for you?
Yeah, I mentioned in my presentation, and sorry, my hand is up. I mentioned in my presentation that we are doing our own test plant for methane pyrolysis. It's up and running and on track to, and that's been a 10+ year R&D initiative. So it's really taking from lab to a slightly larger test scale, on track to the pilot plant in about 2026, and then commercial availability about 2030. But from about 2013 onward, I think recently officially culminated, we led a consortium in Germany with ThyssenKrupp, Lynn and other German universities, funded by the government there, to really get going on the R&D front. Here in Canada, we are not necessarily for hydrogen yet, but for broader innovations, very active in the partnership landscape, everything from dozens of research initiatives with Canadian universities, but we actually are co-located with Plug and Play Canada, which is a startup accelerator in our office as well, post-COVID. They have space, nobody has seen them yet in our offices. So extensive intent to partner and certainly scout partners in Canada, not just for Canadian projects, but for potentially global projects across the BASF group.
Thank you for that, Irene. That's very interesting. Rob from Lafarge, because I got two Robs looking at me there. For Lafarge, to what extent are the decisions to invest in hydrogen driven by the need to reduce the carbon content of your product? Are you getting pressure from your customers to say, I want to see a lower carbon intensity concrete, in my buildings? Is that where the pressure is coming from, or is it coming elsewhere?
I think that there's two reasons we're looking at it. One is, to misquote Wayne Gretzky, we know where the puck is going, so we're trying to anticipate that. And my vice president of Ready Mix often over the years would tell me that none of his customers are asking about carbon. He's no longer saying that. We're having customers who are very interested in buying low carbon products. The Biden administration, along with the Liberal government, are looking at a Buy Clean program where building materials will start to have a kind of embedded carbon price where they'll make a selection of the final bidder based on the carbon intensity. That's not rolling out yet, but it's imminent. It was supposed to be rolled, the initial phase was supposed to be rolled out in September, but some kind of election thing happened and that delayed things. So these things are coming down the pike, and smart companies are going to try to act now because it's going to take several years to roll in some of those technical changes. So we're active on this file. When we're trying to compete with another ready-mix company on a delivered embodied carbon load of concrete, that's the actual, that last hour's drive or half hour's drive to the site does add because it's only looking at about 8 cubic meters of concrete per truck. So you start to add up pretty quick with the fuel use. But we're not just competing with ready mix, other customers or other companies. We're also competing with other building materials, right? And steel, wood, and aluminum, glass, all those kinds of things are all potential competitors for us. So we need to move now. And the final thing I'll say is that if you look at the cement industry as a whole, we represent 5 to 8% of the world's CO2. So even if you don't think about the customer wanting to buy low carbon, we're going to eventually be priced out of the market at some point. And if we want to maintain our share price, I can tell you there's active shareholder activism right now on decarbonization of our industry. Lafarge Wholesome, which is our new name globally, we're probably in the neighborhood of about 1% of the world's CO2 emissions, to put this in some context for you. And Canada's around 2%. So you can see that we as an industry have a significant risk facing us. So that's the other reason that we have customers who want to buy low carbon, and we have to push low carbon products out into the market if we're going to survive. So that's what's driving this, and hydrogen is one of those pieces.
Thank you very much, Matthew. That's, I mean, I think we're seeing that I know customers are speaking up, and it's causing changes. Do you think that if you follow your plan and are able to convert, I mean, does this make you, if you're able to do it ahead of your competitors, it sounds like it's going to give you a distinct competitive advantage in the market?
Absolutely, but recognize that our total global emissions, transportation is about 5%. Right. Where we need to do the work is at our cement plants, but every little bit helps, and we've got to stop thinking of the silver bullet solutions. The hackneyed phrase here is it's no silver bullet, but maybe some silver buckshot.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question from the audience. Again, it's listed as my case. So it says, is there not a limit of how much hydrogen can be blended with natural gas to preserve energy content? Oops, sorry, somebody specifically, that minute. Hang on here. It's a long question here. Yeah, somebody's it's moved the question. So I don't know who wants to take that, but it's all about I guess the limits of blending. Anybody want to take that?
So I'll start. Certainly, from a natural gas perspective, we are looking at the type of the limits for blending and how it impacts either the pipe going across Canada or the burner tips that are going into homes that would eventually have the blended gas. So in Europe, I know that the concentrations are higher. We're seeing between 10 and 20% as blended limits within natural gas. And here in Canada, we are sort of hovering around the 5 to 10% right now. And so there's a tremendous amount of work being done on just how much can be blended with respect to especially appliances being used on natural gas or some of the new opportunities for HVAC in homes. One of them is the natural gas heat pump or micro CHPs. And here again, if there's blended hydrogen, just how much can you use without having to adjust or change the nozzle or the burner tip. So there's a lot of work being done, Lynn, on that, and we continue to do that work so that we can blend accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Irene, back to you. A lot of the products that you produce are enablers to other products, and therefore your value chain is you may be sitting a little bit earlier in the value chain. What kind of pressure are you getting to reduce the carbon intensity of your products? And is there any specific pressure coming out of the EU, for example, EU, UK, with new labeling requirements on products and carbon intensity?
I mean, a multi-part question, but long story short, absolutely yes. We, in some cases, are not too far from the end consumer. For instance, we might sell ingredients like a surfactant into a personal care brand that you and I buy every day from a Shoppers Drug Mart. So we're not too far up. So there's a lot of pressure in general from a portfolio of products to prove carbon intensity, GHG emissions and carbon intensity. And we've taken almost the proactive initiative to quantify the impact of all of our products in our portfolio. And there's a lot, tens of thousands. And this is a multi-year initiative. We've talked about it publicly, with full teams in place to do so. And this includes not just the emissions, so to speak, from our own operations, but up and down the value chain of that product, raw material vendors, all the way to sort of disposal. So this is kind of our reaction to that. Maybe I'll speak a bit more generically that the EU policies are absolutely informing, and in many cases ahead of what we see, certainly across North America. It informs anyway us as a company, but our product development and where we aspire to be. Unlike some of the way a lot of multinationals are structured, typically Canada being part of North American region, in the regard of, I would just say, sustainability and the impact to our product development, Canada is quite closely linked directly with the EU and in a lot of the projects I mentioned as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. There's a question on what does Matthew from Next Hydrogen, what does your collaboration look like with Canadian Tire? And because we all know Canadian Tire. I jotted down a question, what does Canadian Tire use the hydrogen for? Is it in the stores? Is it in their warehouse? I'm just curious on that.
Lynn, it's Peter. I think we lost
I think
Matthew,
so as well. Okay, that's all right.
My understanding is that it's used for warehouse facilities for forklifts.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that as well. It's mostly for forklifts, but Canadian Tire is sizing their electrolyzers at least 2 of their locations to provide excess to other off-takers. And I'm not sure what those off-takers are at this point, but they're clearly keen to establish hubs so that there's more than one purpose for the hydrogen they're producing.
Okay, thank you so much for filling in for Matthew. A tech question here. Tech question to hydrogen tech companies. Is steam important to producing hydrogen? We at co-generate solar, co-generate electricity and steam boiling water at the same time. Anybody can take that.
Yeah, Martin here. There are, being a startup company and having been at Ontario Centers of Excellence, or now Ontario Centers of Innovation, some of the interesting technologies that exist now have the capability to turn low-grade waste heat. So, i.e., if you're turning some of that thermal energy into steam or water that is not or hot water that's not necessarily at a high temperature, there are technologies like Smarter Alloys, for example, has a way to extract the heat from that and turn that into more electricity, which could then theoretically be turned into more hydrogen quite easily. So I would invite you to look at those types of technologies as that's certainly another way to get a more thermodynamic bang out of your solar endeavors and wind endeavors.
Great, thank you for that, Martin. Another really good question here is, where does I would imagine Canada, hydrogen supply chain and industry, where do they need to catch up? Okay, Mark, I see your hand up. All yours.
Demonstration deployment. We have very leading companies in terms of the technology. What we need is Canadian deployments. They're involved in projects around the world. We need to anchor them here in Canada, which will only happen if they can see business growing here in Canada. And we need to benefit from that. So I would say that the number one thing we need to get going right now is getting those demonstrations and deployments underway here in Canada. And that needs policy support, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Irene, I think you've got your hand up as well.
Just make a comment from a global lens, and we are very much keeping Canada in the radar in general, given the size of our operations here. We'd like to see incentives that are equally balanced between the TRL levels. So it would be nice to have some of the more disruptive, costly, medium to longer term technologies qualify for some of the funds.
Okay, that's a great answer. One of the questions here from somebody in the audience is, as a young professional without any experience in clean tech, trying to switch industries into clean tech, what are some recommendations you would have? Maybe one or two quick ones.
Do it.
So do it, yeah. So whoever you are, because it shows up as Mikey, and I don't think that's who you are, but I would say do it as well. Having been involved in it since 2013, the Canadian ecosystem is a fantastic ecosystem. The things that we do, we punch way, 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 way above our weight, and the diversity at every level of what's happening is very, very exciting. So, I agree with Mark. Get in, whether it depends on your background, but there's lots of people looking for, good folks who are very committed. So there you go.
Joking aside, out to the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association and MICA if you'd like to know more about the industry in this sector.
Yeah, joking aside, it is a very exciting sector. I've worked in it for many, many years, and the investment and opportunities that are happening in this sector are really quite remarkable. So I think it's a very good career choice. As Peter says, there's websites you can check to get information about companies. There's networking opportunities, and I would encourage you to get out and talk with some of these companies. They're very open. They're often looking for talent, and they're growing, et cetera. So it is seriously a very good opportunity to get into.
Okay, so I've been told it's time to wrap up so that we can respect the time. So thank you very much to the panelists. It was very, very interesting to learn about what you're doing. And I think, the message for me is that there's a lot happening in this sector. There's a lot of players, and I think it sort of behooves us all to keep an eye on this. And certainly at EDC, we're looking for the companies. Some of you, we know already. If you don't know us, I put my email in the chat. We're happy to talk to you about the projects, and also reach out to SCTC, BDC. There's lots of great help. The Clean Growth Hub is a great source for all things clean tech at the federal level. So thank you, OCTIA, Mikey, Peter, for having me. And I think it's over to you, Robert Stasko.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And yeah, in order to keep on track, I'll try and make this really short in terms of a kind of an overview of what we've heard today. And I want to say that Minister Piccini's address to us was actually surprisingly supportive of the kinds of things that we're hoping to do here in Ontario. And so I personally plan to hold his feet to the fire in some manner to make sure that a lot of those initiatives that he kind of outlined for the government actually happen. I also want to just thank Mark Kirby for his excellent presentation, and I want to wonder if he's willing to share that with the attendees. And if he is, then perhaps Makey can make sure that everybody who signed into the conference has a copy of that, including me. And so I just want to, again, thank you to our presenters. Irene, I'm really interested to hear more about methane pyrolysis and the production of carbon. That's, I think, is far easier to sequester than CO2. So I'm really liking to hear about, methane pyrolysis. In fact, and in pyrolysis of waste streams and biomass. I think that this is a very promising arena. I'm happy to hear from Lafarge and from Robert about, converting concrete ready-mix trucks to hydrogen, either through a blend or ultimately, hopefully, for pure hydrogen. I think this would be an excellent demonstration and would show leadership by Lafarge. I'll talk a little bit about standard hydrogen, and I have to say, Martin, I'm really happy to know that you are part of the solution to a plastics kind of universe where everybody's trying to, shall we say, ban plastics. It would be nice to be able to say, well, thanks to COVID, maybe banning plastics was not a great idea because we still need plastic in a lot of sectors. It's nice to know that there's a way of dealing with that waste stream. As far as the NGIF, and I have to say, John, so happy to hear that you guys are investing in developing these new technologies, and you're probably going to hear from me. So, and finally, Next Hydrogen, Matt's not here, but I just want to mention that yes, Next Hydrogen is, again, one of our local suppliers of technology, and we're actually very excited because they're looking to become number 3 after Cummins and Ballard in terms of supplying hydrogen technology in Canada. And again, for Ontario Hydro, but for other off-takers of that technology. I just wanted to give one small pitch, 2 small pitches, if I will. The Ontario almost green grid that was mentioned by the minister, where only 2 or 3% of our electricity comes from fossil sources. We really hope to leverage that over time, both with low cost and surplus electricity, to produce hydrogen that we believe will compete with diesel for heavy transportation purposes. And I can't talk very much about it, but you probably will hear more about it at our conference, which I'm just plugging right over my head here. H2 Impact 2021, you can Google it. But the fact is, I believe that Minister Piccini will roll out his Ontario strategy at our conference. So I strongly recommend that you consider attending. And on that note, I'll stop. And thank you very much for bringing me onto this. And all of you have a great day.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone. And sorry for the name hiccup. I don't know what happened. And OCTIA will do more on hydrogen as well. And we'll see you again soon, hopefully. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.